Hello there. If you're here, please take a moment to sit down on the sofa in your living room and prepare yourself a glass of water. If you're already in bed, let your body relax and listen to the story in the most comfortable way possible. My name is Ran. I am 55 years old and live in the suburbs of Chicago. For nearly 3 decades, I've been the wife of Robert, a kind, hardworking man and also distant in that way only women who've been married a long time truly understand. After more than 20 years together, I can't remember the last time he touched me simply because he wanted to, not out of habit. We don't argue, but it's that steady silence that slowly drained me. Ever since Robert got promoted and started traveling more for work, the house has felt quieter, emptied of a man's presence. Junior, Robert's son from a previous marriage, moved in for a while to save on college expenses. He's 22, young, confident, a little reckless, but surprisingly respectful and thoughtful. I often tease Junior's got your stubborn streak, Robert, but at least he listens with his eyes. At first, I thought Junior's stay was just temporary, a brief transition, but somewhere along the way, hearing the sound of him firing up the coffee machine in the kitchen each afternoon began to feel comforting. We didn't talk much, but now and then Junior would ask about books, movies, or quietly help me in the garden without saying a word. There were fleeting moments, a glance, a casual question that made my heart slow down just a little. I didn't let myself think too far. Even if Robert rarely called anymore, even if I felt like just another fixture in the house to him, I was still his wife, still Junior's stepmother, but I was also a woman still alive, still feeling, still longing to matter to someone. And then something unexpected happened. My father fell and I had to return to my hometown urgently. Robert was in Seattle. There was no one else to drive me but Junior. I thought it would be just a few hours on the road, safe, simple like everything else in my life had always been. But I was wrong. Some journeys aren't just about where you're going. They're about what gets stirred up along the way. And I never imagined that drive would be the beginning of everything I had buried so deep inside. I could no longer ignore it. We left just before noon, the sunlight filtering gently through the trees in front of the house. Junior loaded the bags into the trunk while I sat in the passenger seat, holding a bottle of water, occasionally glancing at his quiet, thoughtful face. On the radio, a soft jazz tune played, the kind of music Robert always called depressing, but I liked how it made time slow down. "You okay?" Junior asked suddenly as we cruised through the wide-open suburbs. A simple question, but his voice carried an unmistakable sincerity. I turned to look at him, part surprised, part touched. "I'm fine, just a little worried about my father," I said, then added, "Thanks for coming with me." He smiled, not like I had much of a choice, he joked, but his eyes said something else, something gentle. I don't know if it was the quiet roads or the unfamiliar closeness, but something between us felt like it was shifting, slowly, softly, undeniably. About 3 hours in, just as we were nearing the town, the car suddenly jolted and came to a stop on an empty stretch of country road. The warning lights blinked red. Junior cursed under his breath and stepped out to check. I got out too, uneasy. After a few fruitless phone calls, we had to accept an inconvenient truth. We'd be spending the night at a roadside inn, waiting for a mechanic the next morning. At check-in, the elderly woman at the front desk said gently, "Just one double room left. I hope that's all right." I looked at Junior, he looked at me, a beat of silence. No one said anything. I nodded, "It's fine, it's just one night." The room was small, simple, and worn. A double bed, pale yellow walls, warm light casting a golden glow. I set down my bag and stood near the window, pretending to admire the sunset. Junior sat on the edge of the bed, quietly removing his watch. My heart beat slower, heavier, not from fear, but because I couldn't ignore the feeling anymore. I was standing at the edge of something that shouldn't happen, but something I couldn't entirely push away either. One night, one room, and a quiet realization that I too still longed to feel seen, heard, and human. And from that moment on, I knew this trip was no longer just a trip. Maybe you're hearing this on a quiet evening, or in the middle of life's chaos. Wherever you are, thank you for taking the time. It's your quiet presence that gives meaning to these words. We invite you to continue listening to part 2 of the story, The Turning Point, the trip to Element's father's house. I stepped out of the bathroom, a towel over my shoulder, dressed for the night, thin enough to absorb the night's chill. Junior was lying sideways on the bed, his back to me, scrolling through his phone, but not really paying attention. The room was so silent that I could hear every small sound of the old air conditioner, the wind softly whistling through the window frame. "Are you done showering?" Junior asked without turning around. "Yeah," I replied, gently pulling the towel from my hair, trying to keep my voice calm. "You can use the bathroom. The hot water is still available." He sat up and put the phone down on the table. In a moment our eyes met. No jokes, no familiar mischievous winks, just a silent gaze deeper than necessary. Both realized it, but no one dared to say it. "You sleep on the left or the right?" Junior asked, pointing to the bed. I smiled slightly. "I'm used to the left side." He nodded, then took his things into the bathroom. When the door closed, I finally breathed a sigh of relief. The air in the room seemed to thicken, stretching with each passing minute. I don't know if it's the sound of water flowing from the bathroom, or the image of Junior appearing in my memory. Broad shoulders, calm eyes, the way he looked at me in the flower shop last time. "There is something about you that makes me feel vulnerable, makes me feel more feminine." I climbed into bed, pulled the blanket over my stomach, and turned my back to the other side, pretend to close my eyes. But the sound of water still echoed in my ears, and the image of Junior half awake, half asleep lingered. He returned shortly after. The room's silence emphasized our shared presence. I feel the warmth spreading gradually, the distance between the two bodies fading away in silence. A gentle turn, then another, and then his hand brushed mine, tentative and brief. I froze, not in fear but in confusion. I didn't move, unsure what it meant, or what to do next. Just one night, I told myself, it's just a small bump. But the emotions I'd buried for years rose quietly within me, conflicted, persistent. And at that very moment, I knew this was no longer an accident. This is the boundary, and somehow I am getting closer. I woke up in the middle of the night, not because of noise nor because of light, but because of an unusually rapid heartbeat, as if some vague dream also dared not linger long in my mind. Junior was still lying next to me, breathing steadily. I didn't dare to turn back and look, just lay still, eyes wide open in the dark, distinctly feeling the warmth radiating from the tiny distance between us. I was enveloped in a whirlwind of emotions. A part of me is screaming a warning. This is wrong. This is Robert's son. It's Junior, the kid I used to see only as the jokester at the dining table during every holiday. But the other part, the one that had been dormant for so many years, is coming back to life intensely. The memory of tonight flashes through my mind like a slow-mashing film. Junior's presence as he stepped out of the bathroom, calm and quiet, lingered in my thoughts more than it should have, looking at me lying by the bed, his eyes seeming to want to say something but unable to voice it. That hesitant touch, light as a breath but carrying an undeniable weight. I wonder if Robert were here, would I feel this way? If Logan, the man I once loved, the one I sacrificed my youth to be with, if he had given me even a fraction of the attention that Junior inadvertently revealed, would I still be moved by a glance? A touch of the hand? "Can't you sleep?" Junior's voice whispered, interrupting the tangled train of thought. I turned my head back and caught his gaze. Junior's eyes were still open, sparkling in the dim light of the bedside lamp. "Not really," I replied softly. "And you?" He shook his head. "I feel the same way. Just feels strange." I pursed my lips. Strange is a must. Is it because of you, or because of what is happening between us? Didn't answer right away because I don't know what to call it. What is happening? We haven't done anything wrong. But it's no longer right either. No longer carefree. No more distance. "Junior." I softly called his name as if to remind myself who he was. But he just leaned in, looked straight into my eyes without flinching. "I know what you're thinking. And I feel the same way." He paused for a moment. "I don't intend to break anything. I don't want to turn this into a bad situation. But I can't pretend that I don't feel anything. The atmosphere when you were close like this?" Those words were like a small fire smoldering in my chest. Dangerous, but strangely warm. I sat up, wrapped the nightgown around myself, needing to create some distance. "You are Robert's son," I said, my breath trembling. "Do you know what that means?" "I know," Junior replied without hesitation. "And if I could choose again, I wouldn't be able to avoid feeling this way about you." I turned my face away. My heart feels like it's being pulled between two ends of a rope. One side is reason, marriage, the morals I once believed in, and the other side is emotion. It is the sincere gaze of a young man, yearning but not possessive. It's something I haven't felt in over 10 years. A little while later, Junior gently sat up and got off the bed. I'll sleep on the floor so you feel more comfortable, he said softly. I watched your silhouette, speechless. I didn't stop it. But I didn't feel any lighter either because I know tonight has changed everything. And tomorrow I will no longer be the old woman. The next morning I woke up to the faint sunlight filtering through the curtains. Everything in the room was still somewhat unusual. I turned my head to the other side of the bed, the space still warm. But Junior was no longer lying there. My gaze swept around the small room, then stopped at the corner of the floor where last night he had voluntarily lain down to keep his distance. The pillow is neatly folded. The blanket is neatly arranged. Junior got up earlier than me. Mixed emotions surged within me, relieved that nothing had crossed the line, yet also disappointed, as if while I was still struggling internally, Junior was one step ahead. He stepped back. I found him in front of the small motel lobby, standing next to the car being towed back after the repairs were done. In the early sunlight, Junior looked more mature, calmer, as if last night had been just a vague moment I had imagined. The car is done, he said when he saw me. His voice was even and soft, but his eyes, still those eyes, contained something indescribable. I nodded, feeling my throat choke up, not because I was sad, but because of regret. Regret for something that has just begun to bloom but has to be suppressed. On the way back to the city, we hardly talked much. Occasionally, Junior played some old songs, instrumental pieces full of emotion. I don't need to ask what you're thinking, I know, because I am thinking the same way. As I approached the neighborhood, my heart suddenly started beating faster. Robert will be there. Everything will go back to normal. The outside will be calm, but inside me it won't be. Before the car came to a complete stop, Junior turned to me. He was silent for a long time before softly saying, on Elaine, I realize our connection deepened unexpectedly. I don't expect anything from you, but if there were any version of this life where I wasn't Robert's son, perhaps I wouldn't hesitate to choose to live for that feeling. I cannot answer. That Robert was like a needle gently touching the deepest part of my heart, a place that is still alive, still capable of feeling. I looked at you one last time before opening the door and stepping down. The early sun shone on my cheek, but it wasn't enough to warm the emptiness in my heart. I know well that we haven't crossed a boundary, but just one more gentle touch, perhaps I wouldn't have the reason to turn back. And that scares me more than anything. That afternoon, when Robert walked into the house with his familiar weary look after a long business trip, I was still sitting in the kitchen, gently stirring a cup of tea that had long since gone cold. He put down the suitcase, then looked at me with a gentle gaze, but there was something distant that we had both become so accustomed to that we no longer questioned it. Are you okay? Robert asked, his voice even, not really expecting an answer. I nodded slightly. Yeah, everything is still fine. But that's not true because since leaving the motel that day, from the moment Junior softly uttered something I never thought I would hear from such a young person, my heart has not been the same as before. It has a crack, small but real. Robert sat across from me at dinner. He talked about the new client, the terrible food at the conference, and the weather in Houston. I smiled, nodded at the right moments, and responded with short sentences out of habit, but my mind drifted away somewhere. I secretly observed him. This man? The one who used to be everything to me? And perhaps still is, but something has changed. Not because Robert has changed, but because I have seen another version of myself reflected through Junior's gentle and yearning gaze. A version no longer asleep in safety, but yearning to be seen, to be felt. That night, Robert fell asleep very quickly. As usual, he turned his back to me, his steady breathing echoing in the darkness. I lay still, eyes wide open. My heart no longer beats with excitement or restlessness, but only with an increasingly growing cold emptiness. I recall Junior's last words before we broke up. In a different world, maybe things could be simpler without this weight, but we don't live there. We live here. It's not a flirtation, but rather the words of a sincere soul, loving with all the courage that youth can bring. I closed my eyes, trying to dispel the images that flashed by like a slow-mashing film. Junior's gaze, his gentle hand resting on mine, his hoarse voice in the small room. I didn't betray Robert, but I am no longer the woman I was before that trip. And that silent change makes me fear that sooner or later I will have to face the truth. My heart may have chosen a different direction. The next morning, gentle sunlight streamed through the bedroom window, casting a soft golden layer on the old wooden floor. I sat by the bed, holding a freshly brewed cup of coffee, the warmth from the ceramic mug seeping through my fingers, while my mind still lingered somewhere between the past and an unclear future. Robert is reading the newspaper on the porch as usual. He is still that man, thoughtful, calm, stable, but I am no longer sure if I am still that woman. Something has shifted within me gently but irreversibly. And I know from the moment I sat by Junior's bed that night, my heart opened a crack, not to shatter, but to breathe. That afternoon, when Robert went out to meet an old friend, I stood in front of the mirror for a long time, not to admire myself, but to see more clearly the woman reflecting back my gaze. Some features have changed, a more serene gaze, but deeper, a sign of someone who has just passed through a quietly but intensely emotional realm. I opened the drawer, pulled out a neatly folded piece of paper, the message Junior left before we parted ways at the bus station. I know everything is really wrong, but sometimes just a gentle touch is enough to awaken someone. If you need someone to listen, even if it's just in silence, I'm still here. I don't know what I'm going to do with that piece of paper. Keep it, throw it away, send a message, or forever let it sleep in the drawer, like a memory that needs to be kept rather than moved on. That evening, when Robert returned, I was watering the plants in the garden. He walked over and handed me a small sprig of lavender from the roadside flower shop. "I think it suits you," he smiled. I accepted, not smile, but inside my heart was like a lake suddenly stirred by waves. Maybe tomorrow I will forget Junior's gaze. Maybe I will choose to continue a stable, safe life where I am the exemplary wife, the woman who knows how to control her emotions. But maybe I will take a small step towards freedom, not for Junior, but for myself. I don't know yet. I only know that for the first time in many years I feel like I'm living. And perhaps that very thing is the true starting point for any choice thereafter. If you've stayed with Ran all the way to these final lines, thank you truly. This story isn't just about fleeting emotions. It's a quiet whisper about awakening. The way a woman who seemed settled can still touch the deepest parts of her heart. If you've ever seen yourself in Ran's quiet gaze, in that pause between duty and the desire to live honestly with yourself, leave a comment. Share your thoughts, your questions, or even your own story. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss what comes next. Everyday stories told with depth and care where emotions are never small. Your support is what keeps us going, what allows us to keep telling these journeys that speak to the soul. Be part of a community that listens, understands, and dares to face what lies within.